people in Canada. Hey, good evening, guys. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Happy Monday evening, guys. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I had a wonderful opportunity over the weekend to go down to the Panhandle of Florida, spend some wonderful time with some other Wellness Way doctors and also Dr. Patrick Flynn. If you guys don't follow Dr. Patrick Flynn, please make sure that you do that. Spend some time and to strategize on how to make a bigger impact in this world when it comes to health, when it comes to healthcare. So I just got back yesterday. So it's been a very busy weekend of a lot of traveling, literally down in Florida just for 36 hours. I had a chance to go into the ocean, which I don't like to do. I have a terrible fear of sharks. I know it's not, I don't know why I do. Like no one really gets attacked by sharks, but I just do. It's just one of those things. But I went in and I went swimming in the ocean, first time in a very long time. So tonight is supposed to be question and answer. I will tell you, I'm probably not going to have a ton of time to be able to answer questions, only because when I got in on Thursday or yesterday, I'm like, I don't know if I have time to look at anything. A couple of things caught my attention. So I'm like, I'm going to talk about that. Hopefully I have enough time to be able to answer your questions. So I'll do my best, guys. Promise you that. Make sure, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, if you are watching on Facebook, if you're watching on Rumble, make sure that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. And also, if you're watching specifically on Facebook, please share this video with other people. I guarantee they'll get some benefit out of it. So while we have people jumping on right now, remember, coming up, we had our inflammation talk last week. It was awesome. We have one coming up on Thursday, October 19th at 6 o'clock. This is the in-person event. So if you're from the Chicagoland area and you want to work with the Wellness Way Yorkville, but if you suffer with anything in regards to weight loss resistance, infertility, hormone issues, cancer, chronic joint pain, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, any kind of autoimmune condition, hormone imbalance, whatever it might be, one of the biggest things that I can tell you is there's an inflammatory component to all of them, and none of it gets better unless you first address those things first and foremost. When you handle inflammation, guys, I'm going to tell you, you feel better. Everything starts to work better because most issues that you're dealing with are either due to some kind of inflammatory trigger, and what's causing that is going to be mental stress, chemical inflammation, or even physical stressors too. It's why spine and why the nervous system, why we preach that too, is because if you look at the connection between the spine, spinal cord, the joint capsules of the neck, and how it influences proprioception of the brain, and how it causes a healthy moving spine causes a de-stressed brain. And where are those hormones actually originating from? The pituitary gland. And that's why it influences the thyroid. That's why it influences your fertility hormones, testosterone, things like that. So guys, it all works together. So if you're from the Chicagoland area, please get registered for that event. Spaces will always fill up for that. And if you are not from the Chicagoland area, if you're from the contiguous 48 states, please make sure that you pay attention to the contiguous 48 states, because people all over ask me, hey, can you work with me? I'm like, we just can't get what we need. We can't get the labs into other countries, and things like that. But if you are from the contiguous 48 states, you want to work with me, you want to work with the Wellness Way Yorkville, you can go ahead and watch the inflammation webinar. Just follow links up at the top of the page. If you are on Instagram, on Linktree, it's if you're on Facebook, you'll see it up to the top, whether on Wellness Way Yorkville or on Dr. Nathan Thompson, you'll be able to see. If you're on Rumble, YouTube, follow my Linktree, and then you will see the inflammation webinar. You can register and watch it right now. You'll see a link at the end to be able to schedule a discovery call with me. But I want you to watch that inflammation because it's going to help you to understand where we need to head first. So please get registered for that. Right now, I want you to do it, not right now, just when we finish up. All right. Now, coming up, I spoke with Dr. Patrick. He is super, super excited for the I Disagree tour. He's going to be stopping by October 24th, 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock p.m. We have a ton of awesome vendors. You'll see some videos of some of our vendor spotlights that we have. We're going to have 200 people at that event. It's going to be awesome. Whitetail Ridge Golf Course right here in Yorkville, Illinois. It's going to be an awesome event. Tickets, I believe, are $15, but they're going to go up either tomorrow or the next day. And so don't miss out on the early bird discounts. So if you are from, I don't care, 5 hours, please make sure you get to that event. I promise you, it's absolutely life-changing. Dr. Patrick is one of the most amazing speakers. He's one of the most gifted speakers that I've ever heard. He could actually inspire me, and I am the least inspirational person. I do not get inspired, but he does. he can inspire me. And so make sure to get registered for that. I think right now we're at about 75 people with about 4 weeks left tomorrow. So I know a lot of people are going to get registered really late. Don't be someone who is procrastinating. Get it done so that you can commit to being there. We'll have hors d'oeuvres at that event, lots of vendors, tons of giveaways. It's going to be an awesome night. Please make sure that you get registered for that. You guys ready for a little bit of great information? I think this is really, really great. And a lot of it has to do with questions people ask me when I put out certain social media posts and reels and things like that, or complaints, or, I mean, my goodness, this week alone, someone said you should be sued. You should get your license taken away. You should, I mean, probably, I mean, at some, I won't even say it, but at some point, this was a couple of years ago, things got so bad that we had to buy a gun at the front desk. we were we were that scared. So just so you know, so I did a reel that people ask me, because people ask me these questions. These are sincere questions. Hey, doc, should I get the booster? Okay, and so you can go ahead and watch that reel. But people said, there's no way that this new booster was actually tested on just, on mice. I said, yes, it was. Here's the article. This comes from Newsweek about 2 weeks ago. But I did misspeak. It wasn't 10, it was actually 8. So they had an even lower population size. And so their idea was, well, if the other ones work, then we don't really need to test it on people. We can just see if it produces an antibody response in mice. So the new one of saying, hey, this is good to go, FDA approval of 13-1 based on the reactivity, the antibody production of just 8 mice. So there you go. Sign me up. Here's what's also interesting. I saw this today. This comes from the Journal of Nature. This is not necessarily a final copy, but this is from September 25th, and this is in Nature. So it was put out today. And what they're talking about is they're talking about these COVID antivirals that have come out. Now, if you know that Pfizer came out with Paxlovid, I did a video on that probably maybe a year and a half ago. And I talked about, here's the research behind it. Here's how it's supposed to work. And here is actually things that can work as antivirals that would actually clinically be better than taking Paxlovid, taking some kind of antiviral. There's another one out there, though. This was developed by Merck. I'm going to try to say this correctly. Molnupiravir. Okay. Hopefully I pronounced that right, but some of these medication names are so complex. I think they do that to sound fancy or something. But this is the Merck's version of the antiviral. And here's what some scientists that are looking at this, here's actually what they said. And they said it's associated with mutations, with certain mutations. And these mutations, some of them, because the idea is we're going to mutate the virus so that it can't hurt you. They say some of these mutations get through and actually can be a cause of certain mutations that can infect people, in which you are going to need to get a booster every year or so. Isn't that interesting? Probably have heard of this because, with the advent of antibiotics and the fact that they're massively overprescribed, and you see that sometimes the antibiotic doesn't kill off, or you'll have mutations as a result of the antibiotic, and some of these bacteria slip through and then become antibiotic resistant. Well, anytime, I always say this, you can't trick Mother Nature. Does that make sense? You can't trick Mother Nature. Mother Nature always wins, and you always have to work with it, and you can never, ever defeat it. So that's what history has proven time and time again. So I always say this, there is a God, and it's not me. So here's what they said from Nature. Molnupiravir, an antiviral medication that has been widely used against SARS-CoV-2, acts by inducing mutations in the virus genome during replication. Here's what they also say. However, If some patients treated with this antiviral do not fully clear SARS-CoV-2 infections, there could be the potential for onward transmission of mutated viruses. And this is literally like this is the first draft of this, and of course, Merck has already come out with a statement defending it, but kind of makes you wonder, right? And so, my opinion is always this: is that you cannot trick Mother Nature, and I think that we have seen that over the last 3 years. Let's talk about something else too. So I don't know how long that this is going to run, but I want to make sure that I have some time for some questions as well. So I want to ask the question of: is it genetic? Is it genetic? Because haven't you ever wondered this? And in fact, a lot of times I'll answer a question with a question. But haven't you ever wondered this? It's the same thing when I say about the immune system is why do two people who have never been exposed to a particular virus, why do two people exposed to the same virus for the first time, one dies and the other one gets the sniffles? Is it not the same virus? Well, what's the difference? The difference is the strength of the host. That's one of the biggest things that we always talk about people is rather than try to weaken the environment to an already weakened person, why don't we strengthen the person to make them able to withstand any environment? That's the two different perspectives. See, you know where I'm coming from when it says, weaken the environment to an already weakened person. But I say strengthen the person so that they can withstand any environment. And it's no different than the whole idea in children's sports, kids' sports, where now everybody just gets a medal. You participated, you should get a medal, and then we have kids who don't understand why when they don't win in everyday life, they can't understand why. But that whole idea is, hey, everybody's going to just get a medal. So I've always talked about how can we make you stronger to withstand any environment, and so not make you weaker. So a lot of times when people can't understand, you're like, well, my doctor doesn't know why this is happening. He just says that it's genetic. And I've had people try to explain away things being genetic, and have literally stretched it so far to even blame someone who had no no blood relation, but they were an in-law. Doesn't really work that way, but everyone wants to blame genetics. And you know why people want to blame genetics is because it just does come down to I don't want to take personal responsibility. So if I could just blame something that is out of my responsibility, then I'm going to latch on to that. That's our nature. Our nature is that we want to blame other people and that we're lazy. And that's one of the first things that I don't tolerate in patients. I don't tolerate you blaming your outside circumstances because that will never ever get you well. So here's this whole idea of saying that everything is genetics. Let me ask you some questions about this. All right, so let me ask you a question. Is autism genetic? Okay, so I had someone who commented and say it's 100% genetic. I said, well, tell me which genes, because they don't know which genes. They've never identified them. Um, but is it 100% genetic, meaning that it is passed down and it is present at birth, coming from father or coming from mother? Now, we're not going to get into MTHFR, and things like that, because I believe that is highly epigenetic or above the genes, meaning the genes are changing based on environment at that time. But I want you to think of this: if autism was genetic, do you see people who are autistic, a man with autism and a woman with autism, getting together and starting a family? Yet, why have we seen such an increase in autism? And people will say, well, it's just because we're diagnosing it more. You know what? Ask the mother and ask the father if it's just because we are diagnosing it more. So I want you to think of something. If it was genetic, people with autism are not passing on their genes. They're not marrying and they're not starting families. I want you to think about that. I mean, I've had people even blame fertility issues on being genetic. And I want you to really, really think about that is when someone says that my infertility is genetic, then how on earth were you ever born? Really think about that. How on earth were you ever born if your parents passed on their infertility? So I want you to think about that. How about this one? Allergies and asthma must be genetic. I was told that because I developed severe asthma at 4 years of age. I won't tell you when I got it, but I started drawing or connecting the dots of when it started to happen, when my immune system started getting really angry with something. But I was 4 years of age and then started to develop at 6 years of age. I started to develop terrible allergies as well. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this is suffering when I didn't have to suffer. Although I'm thankful that I did suffer because it helped drive me to doing what I do today. But allergies and asthma, because I would always ask, well, why do I have asthma? Well, it's just genetic. Why did I have allergies? Well, it's just genetic. Well, why did I get asthma at 4? Why was I not born with it then? Or why did I get allergies at 6? Why was that? Or why did I start getting strep throat all the time? When I was 8, 9 years of age. Oh, that was just genetic as well. Why do I have irritable bowel syndrome? Well, because you have a family member who has that too. But okay, why did I get it when I was 12? Why do I have acne? I don't know about that. No one had acne in our family, so we can't answer that. And it was like you're going to have a bad back. You're going to be injured all the time, and you can go and you can find a family member who has something similar, and then blame it on their family member. But I had allergies and asthma. But let me ask you another question: if I had if it was genetic, then why don't I have them anymore? So I threw away my asthma medication when I was 22 years of age. I haven't touched it. So for 24 years, I haven't taken any kind of allergy medication in 24 years. So what happened? And I know someone's going to say, well, it was a spontaneous remission. You know what you call that? You call that healing. When someone says it's a spontaneous remission, no, that's actually a healing. That's a spontaneous healing. So I want you to think of this whole idea of genetics because it's really easy to blame something outside of us, meaning we don't have to take any kind of responsibility. But let me give you an example. I passed down, I guess, my terrible genes to my kids. My wife passed on her migraine headache genes to our kids as well. These are three of my kids, 16, 14, and 12. This picture is a little bit old. But here's what's really interesting. We gave them our genes, and yet none of my kids have asthma. None of them have allergies. In fact, none of them have been on an antibiotic. None of them have had a toxin put inside of their body. Isn't that incredible? And I'm not a perfect parent by any stretch of the imagination. It's not to tell you how great I am, it's to give you hope. So, yes, we are the weird family on the block, but I will gladly be called weird for having healthy children. So, I gave them their genes, but for some reason, they're not expressing all of the genetic defects that I passed on to them. So, it kind of makes you wonder, well, if it's not genetic, then why are people getting sick? And we call it genetic because so many more people are getting sick. Just remember this: if it is genetic, you would see it stay consistent within the population. You are even seeing type 1 diabetes, which they call genetic. You are seeing an increase faster than where it would be if it was genetic, because you're seeing a larger percentage of people, especially suffer with autoimmune disease and type 1 diabetes. So, what it begs the question, guys, it begs the question this: are your genes changing? Are your genes evolving? Are they changing? The answer is yes, your genes are changing. And what makes them change? Your environment. I had a video probably from a year and a half ago that actually saw that men who were diabetic, type 2 diabetic, that then passed on to their offspring, that the baby was more likely to have blood sugar issues and obesity. And that's why when my wife and I had our fourth, I was kind of like, oh, thank God, because like I've never, I've never, how do I say this, made a deposit with such great health markers. I guess that's a good way to put it. So, because I knew that I was a lot healthier than even where I was when we had our first. So, your genes are changing based on the environment that you're putting in. This is also why that if someone says, "Hey, I'm coming to you because I'm having some fertility issues," I actually caution them, don't try to get pregnant right away. Give it some time and let your genes adapt to your healthy lifestyle. Actually, the National Institute of Health says yes. Yes, your genes do change. So the National Institutes of Health, so it's called, this is from about 7 years ago, DNA changes predict longevity. Here's what they say: our DNA changes as we age. Now, I would argue with that. Our DNA changes as we get beat up. So as we get beat up, as we get older, that's what starts to change. So that's why everyone says, here's how you're supposed to be at 30, here's how you're supposed to be at 40, here's what it's supposed to be at 50. And I'm like, no, 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 we're changing the ball game here. Because when people say you have to fall, you know, fall apart at 40 years of age, I'm like, I'm still kind of waiting for that. Um, I'm stronger than I was at 35 years of age. Like, when am I supposed to really, really fall apart and break down? And yes, we will age a little bit. And yes, I don't imagine being able to deadlift 400 pounds or whatever when I'm 80 years of age. But I also plan on being stronger than anyone else who is 80 years of age, when they said you're just supposed to become decrepit, and just go quietly in the night. I refuse that. So we're changing the way that people are aging by decreasing the amount of damage that's taking place to our genes. So here's what they say in National Institutes of Health: our DNA changes, excuse me, as we age. Some of these changes are epigenetic, above your genes. They modify DNA without altering the genetic sequence itself. Epigenetic changes affect how genes are turned on and turned off, and thus help regulate how cells in different parts of the body use the same genetic code. This can also be one of the reasons why, for example, if you start beating yourself up and you're like, I'm gaining weight, I'm still eating the same amounts of food, but I'm gaining weight. Well, what's happened to any kind of cellular damage, like your mitochondria, that have lost the ability to be able to take in energy, to use it as energy? So this is why when we talk about your genes, we're talking about genetic expression, environment. We're talking about epigenetics. We're talking about helping to not damage our genetic expression, but also, if there is, being able to repair it. So when everybody wants to blame genetics, I would say, instead, maybe it is genetic, but maybe your genes are just really, really beat up. And what's beating up your genes? That's the thing. What is beating up your genes, or what's causing oxidative damage to your genes, or epigenetic changes based on the environment that you are putting it in? And this comes down to the whole idea of the wellness way approach. And it's this: what beats up our genes? It's thoughts, it's trauma, it's toxins. Thoughts, trauma, toxins. You may also put it as mental stress, toxicity, chemical inflammation, blood sugar issues, deficiencies. Not necessarily, I need to take more B12, but figure out why you are deficient. Is there a problem with physiology that's causing poor absorption? You can go on and on with different types of things, but this is what we are masters at within the wellness way, is being able to understand physiology and see how all of these things work together like a Swiss watch. And so this is why, what beats up our genes? It's inflammation. What's it caused by? Now figure out thoughts, trauma, toxins. And that may be deficiencies, blood sugar issues. It may, so there's so many different things, guys, that are at play here. And that's why you need to understand gastrointestinal physiology. That's why you need to understand the immune system. That's why you need to understand liver physiology, how the body biotransforms toxins. It's why you need to understand all of that stuff. Heck, you don't have to understand it, but just know that we know about it. No one trains and learns more than a wellness way doctor. I can guarantee you that. And in fact, if you want to learn about physiology, go order Guyton Hall's medical textbook of physiology. It's only 1,000 pages long, and then read through it, and then go through it again. Then go through it again. But this time, keep paying more and more attention. So it's just, all of that causes changes within your genetic expression. Because if something is purely genetic, it's expressed from birth. It's expressed from birth. Even if you have a genetic tendency towards something, something has to trigger it. What triggers it? Your environment. So this comes from, again, the National Library, National Institutes of Health. National Library of Medicine. This comes from, I believe, I don't know what actual medical journal it is, BMC, Pulmonary Medicine. And this is a very new article from 2023. So literally like 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old. That's it. And what it's actually called is genome-wide DNA methylation analysis of astragalus and Danshen on the intervention of myofibroblast activation in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Idiopathic, what does that mean? That means no known cause. Pulmonary is lungs, fibrosis, scarring. So we have an unknown cause for scarring in the lungs, which is an inflammatory response. Why do you get scarring anywhere? Because there's tissue damage, and the body is how fibrosis repairs, how the body heals. Someone asked me I think it was on Instagram, they're like, well, what causes thyroiditis? I'm like, well, I want you to think about it. What's the job of your immune system? Itis means inflammation. So inflammation of my thyroid. So what would cause inflammation of the thyroid? What would cause the immune system to want to go after actual thyroid cells? You may have damaged cells due to excessive oxidative damage. A lot of it is lack of selenium. You may also have something that's the toxicity component to it, might be infected virally. And all the immune system is doing is going after and just doing its job. That's why we never say that the body attacks itself. It's silly that people would say the body attacks itself. That's like spraining your ankle and saying my immune system is attacking my ankle. No, it's not. It's having an inflammatory response because that is what is initiating a healing response. So look at it, guys, from a different perspective. So what they talk about is DNA methylation, and I want you to look at astragalus. Okay, so just pay attention. Now, everybody's going to want to go out and try to get a bunch of astragalus. You're going to ask me where you order from, and I will tell you this. Guys, the reason why you cannot find anything that I recommend to patients, because a lot of people are going to sell you something from their online store. I don't want to do that because I don't want you buying stuff that you don't necessarily need. Please stop doing that. When I recommend something to someone, it is because I feel this is one of the best things you can do that's going to have a multifactorial effect on you. And not only that, you need to make sure that you're taking it in a high enough dose. All right. So that's why if I recommend something, there's going to have a huge crossover effect. But for example, astragalus, okay? Here's what they concluded about idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So unknown fibrosis of repair in the lungs. Here's what they say. Based on the methylation levels and gene expression profiles between the TRE and MOD groups, okay, it can be speculated that astragalus and Danshen act on specific genes. So that they call these. One of them is Sonic the Hedgehog gene. That's what they call it, SHH, via regulation at the transcriptional and epigenetic levels during IPF treatment. So our study not only indicates the effectiveness of astragalus and Danshen in treating idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, but also provides various promising therapeutic targets that warrant further study. If you go and you do a PubMed search on astragalus, you will see hundreds and hundreds of articles about it. And there's a lot of different reasons why we may use astragalus with some people. Low in a certain immune cells, there's a cardiovascular benefit to it. There's a benefit in the gastrointestinal system. There is a benefit within the kidneys. There's multiple crossover benefits. And guess what? Astragalus is a sugar. So for those of you who swear off all sugars, astragalus is a polysaccharide. It is a sugar, okay? So here's another one. This comes from about 3 years ago. Reprogrammed epigenetic landscape prophesied functions of bioactive polysaccharides in alleviating diseases. A pilot study of DNA methylome remodeling in astragalus polysaccharide. Here's what they said. DNA methylation, what is it? It is repairing your DNA. So if you ever heard of the process known as methylation, it's the addition of a carbon and 3 hydrogens, and it's the most widely chemical reaction that takes place in the body. Nothing about it is special, but what's special about it is that it happens all over the body. Guys, in order for you to make creatine, there's a methylation process. In order for you to make serotonin, there's a methylation process. In order for you to be able to detox at the liver, it's a methylation process. So methylation is happening. In order for you to be able to relax your arteries, there is a methylation process. Nitric oxide production is a methylation process. If someone is a poor methylator, i.e., you get people with fibromyalgia, for example, or people who are extremely toxic, like in autism, for example. Why do you think so many people, their children have autism? They do an MTHFR test because if they're a poor methylator, they're also a very poor detoxer. Methylation is also needed in order to repair your DNA. And if the DNA aren't getting repaired, then they are breaking down and you are aging faster. So DNA methylation is an epigenetic event that plays critical roles in the pathogenesis, progression, and treatment of human diseases. The results show that astragalus significantly changed the DNA methylome in colonic epithelia with great efficiency. So even within the colon, even within the epithelial lining of the colon, showed great promise as far as healing and repairing. Moreover, we suggested new functions and the involved mechanisms of astragalus in heart disease, in neurological disorders, in reproductive problems, and olfactory dysfunction. In this study, we offered epigenetic mechanisms for astragalus improved even osteoporosis. Isn't that interesting? Guys, let me warn you though, is that if you are asking me where can I get it and you first don't want to change your lifestyle, then you are barking up the wrong tree. So if you look at astragalus, this comes from Aging and Disease, which goes over pages and pages of research on how they have studied astragalus, but yet no one has ever heard of it. If you think about that, you've never ever heard of it. And like, why haven't I ever heard of it? Because where they're studying this is not in the United States. In the United States, you know what they study? They study drugs. And in fact, if they show enough promise, then a pharmaceutical company is going to try to patent the mechanism of how astragalus works so that it can become the next multi-billion-dollar drug. So astragalus from Aging and Disease, here's what they found: oxidative stress reduction, immunomodulation. And in fact, there's research that shows that astragalus can increase stem cell production within the bone marrow, neurodegeneration. So I want you to think of Alzheimer's disease. Also has shown research being anti-tumor, anti-vascular disease. So think cardiovascular disease as well. And so there's so much crossover effect. But I also have to say, these statements have not been approved by the FDA. But you know what has been approved by the FDA? That antiviral that they think is actually causing a progression of different variants, which is why it hasn't gone away yet. All right. So FDA, I just want to let you know, hello. So I want you just to think of that and just stop blaming your genes, guys, and start looking at what can I do in order to blame my life. Heck, I have always said this. If someone told me that whatever I was suffering with was 99% not my fault, it was all based on genes, and there's nothing that I could do, I would say, yeah, but I can change the 1%, and I'm going to give 100% effort in order to change that 1%. Okay. So the other thing I want to go over with you too is menopause a disease? Okay. Is menopause a disease? One of the things that I've learned on social media is if you want to catch a lot of flack, you should talk about Ozempic and Mounjaro, these new weight loss medications, talk about menopause, and then talk about a booster, right? And I'm like, people look around and like, do you really want to go after that? I'm like, I'm here for it. I am here for it. All right. And that's one of the freedoms of just not caring what people think. And it's the best freedom in the world. Once you know who you are, once you know that what your passion is, what your mission is, then no one can take that away from you. So is menopause a disease? Because over the last several years, maybe a couple of decades, they've looked at menopause not as a natural transition of life, but as an actual disease. It's almost how they treat pregnancy now, as a disease. But it's also called the medicalization of of things that are supposed to normally happen. This is why if you have a fever, you're supposed to drug it. This is why, if you have any uncomfortable symptom, it's terrible and you should never ever have it, and you need to drug it. So is menopause a disease? The answer is no. That doesn't negate the fact that some women have a really, really bad day when it comes to menopause, but it's not a disease and it's not an illness. I'm going to give you an example. I want you to think a little bit differently, okay? This is the hormone cycle of a female throughout their whole entire life, okay? So I want you to think of this is your progesterone and your estradiol levels. You have certain levels when you are born. Those stay very consistent until the point where a woman or girl or female hits puberty. You're going to see those fluctuations start to elevate until finally there's going to be start a menstrual cycle. Then when you get, during your fertile years from anywhere from maybe 13, up to 50, 51, 52, give or take, you're always going to see fluctuating hormone levels based on a 28-day cycle. So that's why you will see these go down. That's why you can be 4 different women just during your menstrual cycle. You will also see that when right before a woman starts her next menstrual cycle, and you see the hormone levels plummet. Have you ever seen, where women say, "Oh, my joints hurt, my joints ache, I don't feel very good." Maybe that estradiol is blocking some things that normally should be there. And I've done I've done a live on, hey, why did my cholesterol go up when I started menopause? And there's a very anti-inflammatory effect of estradiol, okay, of how it affects the immune system. So you will have, that's why they've even said a woman's CRP will even elevate right before her cycle. So what causes a CRP to elevate? The immune system, an inflammatory response. So you'll see during the fertile years that you're generally, the hormone levels are going to be higher because you have a source of estradiol and progesterone coming from your ovaries. Now, when you go into menopause, though, those ovaries aren't contributing to progesterone and to estradiol. Where you're getting that contribution is going to come from fat cells, and it's going to come from your adrenal glands. So you'll see when you look at this graph, you will see that these levels then at menopause, they go back to a lower level, and they're very similar to where you were prior to hitting puberty. So I want to ask you a question, okay? I want you to ask you a question. If you say all these symptoms are caused by menopause, then why don't prepubescent girls have menopausal symptoms? Does that make sense? Because you're not seeing prepubescent girls who have the same level of hormones that you have at menopause. You're not seeing them have menopausal symptoms. You know what really the difference is? The difference is that when you are 8 or 9 years of age, your GI system, your liver, your immune system, your human frame, all of those things, they're just, you haven't given enough time to beat it up with lifestyle. And I want you to think of this. How do you know if you're going to have a really bad day when it comes to menopause or the idea of perimenopause? Well, think about your hormone cycle when you are actively cycling. If you're having a problem with that and you're covering it up with birth control, or you're covering it up by manipulating hormones or by taking medications, then I guarantee you're going to have a bad day when it comes to menopause. And so doctors are coming in, they're saying, we'll manipulate you through your hormone cycles, through your fertile years. And then all of a sudden, it's a massive shock and a massive surprise that now you're also having problems during menopause. But you know what the solution is? Let's get those levels back up of estradiol and progesterone. Let's get them back up to where you were during those cycling years. And it's not, let's figure out why you got so beat up and why you're not responding well so that you can go through a natural, normal process of a human being. Rather, it's let's keep those hormone levels up. Let's not actually test and see how those hormones are being metabolized, because they can go down some very bad pathways. Let's not look at what these inflammatory triggers are. Let's not address mental stress or any other stressors as well. It's just running to hormone replacement therapy. And many times there can be devastating consequences. This is another thing that you may be offended, that I'm saying that. And it's like, I hope you are offended, because I don't want to see people get hurt. That's what crushes me, is when people come in and they have been misled and they have been hurt as a result, when it didn't necessarily have to be that way. So again, let me ask you the question. If menopause, if you're having a bad day with menopause and you're at prepubescent levels, then why don't prepubescent girls have menopausal symptoms? So hopefully, guys, that makes a lot of sense to you. Hopefully it gives you a little bit different perspective of how we think and how we act differently, especially when it comes to the Wellness Way approach. So guys, I hope that you get registered. This is when I want you to register right now for that inflammation talk in person coming up. Or if you want to work remotely, get on the inflammation webinar if you're from the contiguous 48 states outside of the Chicagoland area. But then also, I really want you to make that trip, that journey. I don't care how far you are flying in, it's going to be worth it. For the I Disagree tour with Dr. Patrick Flynn, October 24th, 2023. That's going to be here in Yorkville, Illinois, with myself and Dr. Veronica with the Wellness Way, Aurora. It's going to be off the hook. If I can say that, I'm dating myself a little bit, but it's going to be an awesome event. I would love to see people there that follow on Facebook or on Instagram, on YouTube. I would love for you to be there and to be able to meet you in person. And in fact, when I was going through the Atlanta airport, somebody recognized me, which was awesome. I didn't look super hot because it was, I woke up at 4 a.m. to fly back home. But I always love meeting people in person. So I would love to see you guys there so much. So guys, it looks like I don't have time for questions, but you know what? I'll try to go back and maybe answer some of these questions as well. I'll also on Instagram post this to the timeline. So guys, as always, make sure that you share this video, make sure that you follow, and that you also like our page, Dr. Nathan Thompson, and also at the Wellness Way Yorkville Exemplify Health Center. Also, if you're on Facebook or YouTube and Rumble, make sure that you follow us. We'll be putting out great content. We have a lot in the works, a lot coming down the pike. You guys will be pleasantly surprised. So guys, be well, be blessed. It's time for me to pull some dad duty, pick up my son from soccer practice, and I can't be late for that as well. So guys, be well, be blessed. Thank you as always. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll probably be jumping on at some point during the week. So be well and be blessed. And remember who you are.